On a rainy night, especially when you're alone, every sound feels louder than it should. Rain blurs the world, turns headlights into tunnels, and makes empty places feel endless. That night, I learned something unsettling. Rain doesn't hide everything. Sometimes it hides just enough to make you question what you heard and who might have been listening. Okay, so I was driving across the country, mostly driven by the quest to find pretty things. I'm not a hard driver. I'm not about getting from point to point quickly. 3 hours a day is perfect. If I push, I can do 5. But that's my limit, and I don't like driving at night. Night driving feels wrong. Add rain to it and it feels worse. Your headlights make out this narrow tunnel of light, and beyond that is just blackness. That evening, I was getting close to my endpoint, and the sky was already darkening. Heavy clouds were forming in the sky. I stopped at a truck stop to decide if I should sleep there or push on. The goal was to reach this campground with some cool rock formations in a river. I wish I could remember what it was called. It had a dreadful name, something with a dramatic name. I can't remember exactly what it was. That should have been my sign. But my quest for pretty things was more than my common sense. I recalculated how much time it would take me to get there. If I left right then, I'd make it just before full dark. Maybe catch a dramatic, rainy sunset. Spend the next day relaxing. It made sense in my head. So I drove. The rain started lightly at first. Then it thickened. The kind of steady rain that erases details. Trees blurred together. Road signs appeared suddenly out of nowhere. There were fewer cars the further I went. Eventually, none. When I finally arrived at the campground, it wasn't what I'd expected. No other campers were anywhere to be seen. Not a single vehicle. Not a single light. Just rain and trees. I parked, stepped out, and immediately felt it. That strange awareness that you are very alone. The rain muted everything. Even my footsteps sounded lighter than they should have. I grabbed a few quick photos of the rock formations near the river. It was one of the prettiest sights I'd ever seen. But I didn't wander far. It was going to be dark soon, and the rain was getting steadier. On the way back to my vehicle, I noticed the washroom building. A flush toilet. In the middle of nowhere, I headed inside. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The rain tapping on the roof created a constant low hum. I took care of business and then noticed the showers. Curious, I turned one on to test it. The pipes groaned before water came through. Steam slowly curled upward. The sound of water hitting tile echoed through the empty room. And then I heard it. Voices. Right outside the door. One voice said, "He went in here." Another responded, "Okay, let's wait." The words weren't rushed. They were filled with intent. Not whispered. Not distorted. Just loud enough that I could almost picture where they were standing. One slightly to the left of the doorway. The other farther back. My mind began filling in details I hadn't actually seen. The scariest part wasn't the words themselves. It was the tone. There was no panic, no confusion, just certainty. Like they already knew exactly who I was. I stood completely still. The shower water continued running behind me. The rain tapped steadily on the roof. I told myself it was the camp attendant. That would make sense. Maybe they saw me use the deposit box. Maybe they were checking on things. I turned off the shower. The silence that followed was heavy. I walked slowly to the door and opened it. There was no one waiting outside the door. The hallway was empty. The other stalls were empty. I stepped outside into the rain. I found no one. There was another entrance to the opposite washroom. I walked around the side of the building. Rain soaked into my jacket. But still, I found nothing. Something was not lining up. I went back to my vehicle quickly this time. I climbed inside and locked the doors immediately. The rain hit harder now, drumming against the roof of the bus. Nay, water streaked down the windshield in thick lines. The campground beyond the glass looked distorted. like a smudged painting. I replayed the voices in my head. He went in here. Okay, let's wait. Pipe noises don't form sentences. Wind doesn't produce dialogue. I sat there trying to calm down. I told myself maybe it was the acoustics. Maybe the rain hitting some vent created the illusion of words. Maybe exhaustion was messing with me. But I had heard it clearly. Too clearly. I texted a few friends. Explained exactly what happened. Every single one of them told me to leave. Immediately, I didn't start the engine right away. I just sat there, hands resting on the steering wheel, listening. The rain on the roof began to sound less like weather and more like something was running atop the vehicle. I checked the mirrors twice. I saw nothing but sheets of water and empty trees. Still, the feeling wouldn't leave. The sense that whoever or whatever had spoken hadn't been surprised at all. They had been waiting for me to step back outside. As my headlights turned on fully, they swept across the campground. For just a second, the beam passed over the washroom building. And I could have sworn. There were shapes near the side wall. I didn't wait to check again. In my rearview mirror, the washroom building looked smaller and smaller until it disappeared into the dark. The entire drive back to the truck stop felt unreal. I kept expecting to see headlights behind me. There were none. When I finally pulled into the truck stop, there were other vehicles. I was so relieved that I parked under a streetlight and just sat there for a minute. I slept well that night, but even now, years later, I still wonder if I had stepped out of that washroom just a little earlier. Would I have found people waiting for me? It was supposed to be a 5-minute trip home from the store. I've done it countless times. Same sidewalks, same turn at the corner. But that night, the rain changed everything. If I had walked 10 seconds slower, I don't think I'd be telling this story. It was supposed to be a 5-minute walk. The store is barely a few blocks from my house. I've walked it 100 times. I could probably do it blindfolded on a clear day. It was raining so hard that it obscured my vision. The streetlights glowed like hazy halos. I had an umbrella, but it didn't matter. My jeans were soaked from the knees down. My shoes made that awful squelching sound with every step. My sleeves were damp. My hair was plastered to my face. All I wanted was to get home, peel off my wet clothes, and collapse on the couch. I had plans to re-watch Sherlock for the 100th time and not move for the rest of the night. Instead, I turned down the wrong street. I didn't realize it immediately. In that kind of rain, everything looks unfamiliar. Houses blur together. Mailboxes look distorted. Driveways fill with water. You stop recognizing landmarks because you can't see them clearly enough. It wasn't until I was halfway down the block that I realized I'd lost my way. I should be seeing the outline of my house by now. The porch light should have been visible through the rain. There was nothing. I stopped walking. And myself, but the foggy downpour made it impossible. Street signs were hard to read. Everything looked warped behind the curtain of rain. I hurried under a nearby tree, thinking it would at least block some of the rainfall. It didn't. Water poured off the leaves in heavy drips, soaking me anyway. The ground beneath was muddy, and within seconds my shoes sank into it. I pulled out my phone, shielding the screen with my body. There was no signal. The rain distorted the touchscreen, making it hard to even type. I wiped it against my already soaked sleeve and moved it around, but there was no signal. Now I was cold, muddy, half lost, and standing under a tree in near-zero visibility while water ran down my neck. That's when I someone singing. At first, I thought it was maybe a car radio drifting through the rain. But it was a woman's voice. The sound cut cleanly through the rain, in a way that didn't make sense. Rain usually drowns out people's voices, but for some reason I could hear her clearly. My whole body went still. It wasn't the kind of singing you hear from someone having fun in the rain. It wasn't humming. It wasn't playful. It sounded almost like a lullaby. and something about it made the hair on my arms lift. I couldn't see anyone at first, just raindrops and dark shapes of houses. Then I spotted movement across the street. A woman was walking slowly toward the intersection. She didn't have an umbrella, didn't seem to be rushing, just moving through the downpour like it didn't bother her. My brain tried to be logical. Okay, she lives here. She's walking home. Maybe she knew the neighborhood better than I did. I stepped out from under the tree and called out, "Hello, Mom? Can you help me? The rain's so thick and I need to get home soon." I chose my words carefully. I didn't want to sound lost. She didn't respond. She kept singing. The lyrics were hard to catch over the rain, but I could make out something about a girl walking alone in the storm. My stomach tightened. I called out again, "Hello? Can you hear me?" The singing stopped instantly. The silence afterward was worse than the song. Without her voice, all I could hear was the pounding rain and distant thunder. She changed direction and began walking toward me. The closer she got, the more I realized I couldn't see her face. The rain blurred everything above her shoulders. Her hair was plastered down, dark with water. Her clothes clung to her frame. She looked around my age, maybe a little older. That should have been comforting. It wasn't. There was something unnatural about the way she moved, too steady for someone walking through ankle-deep water in heavy rain. She didn't shield her eyes. I had to go. It felt less like she was to go. It felt less like she was approaching me, and more like I had wandered into her path. She stopped about 3 feet away from me, close enough that I should have been able to see her features. I couldn't. The streetlight behind her created a backlit silhouette. Her face was shadowed, and then she started singing again, right in front of me. Same tune, same strange lyrics. Now I could hear more. A girl lost during a violent storm, a body found near water. Something about new mother and father. The words didn't fully connect, but they weren't nonsense. They sounded deliberate. My throat felt dry despite the rain. When she finished the verse, "Song is that?" No response. She tilted her song, "Is that?" No response. She tilted her head slightly. The rain dripped off her hair. I swallowed and tried again. "What song were you singing?" She spoke for the first time. "Did you take it?" Her voice was quieter than her singing. I blinked. "Take what?" She didn't answer. Just stood there. The space between us suddenly felt too small. I became very aware that I was on a street I didn't recognize, in heavy rain, with no one visible in any of the nearby houses. The streets were dark. No cars passed, no porch lights flicked on. It was just us and the rain. "Never mind," I muttered lightly. "I've got it." I stepped sideways, intending to walk past her. She moved too, not blocking me exactly, but adjusting, now matching my direction. My pulse kicked up. I walked faster. She followed, still silent. I didn't look at her, but I could hear her footsteps splashing behind me. I told myself not to run. Running makes you look vulnerable. Running escalates things. But then I heard someone's movement. I glanced back. She was reaching into her bag, pulling something out. I didn't wait to identify it. I ran like my life depended on it. Water sprayed up behind me. My umbrella flipped inside out, and I let it go. I heard her footsteps accelerate. I risked another glance. She was running. And in her hand was something that caught the streetlight. It looked like some kind of metal tool. I turned the next corner blindly. And then I saw it. My street sign. Half obscured by rain, but unmistakable. I bolted down it. My house came into view like a lifeline. I fumbled my keys out with shaking hands, dropped them once, picked them up, jammed the right one into the lock and twisted before entering inside. I slammed the door right behind me and locked it. I stood there, chest heaving, listening. There was nothing but rain. I ran upstairs and checked every window. I didn't dare look outside. For the rest of the night, I kept the TV volume low. I sat on the couch, fully dressed, listening for footsteps on the porch. For a knock. For anything. Nothing came. The next day, when the rain had stopped, I went back out. In daylight, the street I'd turned onto was barely 1 block off from mine. I must have misjudged visibility in the storm. I also noticed something else. Several mailboxes along had been tampered with. One was completely hanging off its hinge. Later that week, a notice went around the neighborhood about someone checking mail during heavy storms, when visibility was low and people stayed indoors. They hadn't caught who it was. I never saw her again. But sometimes I still remember that voice, singing about a girl lost in a storm. And I wonder, if I hadn't run, would she have kept singing? Or would I have been the next verse? I've always had a hyperactive imagination, but stormy nights bring out the creative in me, blurring the thin line between what's real and what my mind is capable of inventing. I tell myself it's just the weather playing tricks on my senses, just an overactive brain filling in the blanks. But sometimes, when the lightning flashes at just the right angle, I can't help but wonder if imagination is only half of the story. It's funny now. It wasn't funny then. In my second year of college, my boyfriend got me this stuffed teddy bear for Valentine's Day. When I say life-size, I mean it stood almost as tall as I did. It was red and white with a hat and a big, cartoonish grin. It was supposed to be a cute and romantic gesture, and at first I was so happy because it was my first ever teddy bear. Sadly, my enthusiasm didn't last for long. One night, I was sleeping on my bed when it felt like something had grazed me. I jumped up in fright, only to see the teddy bear staring at me. There was just something about it that felt wrong. It wasn't just its positioning that felt wrong. Even if its smile felt weird. I told myself it was the lightning outside playing tricks on my eyes. But my chest felt tight, like I'd woken up in the middle of someone else's dream. For a long second, I couldn't shake the feeling that it hadn't always been facing that direction. Over time, my hatred for it increased, but I didn't want to hurt my boyfriend's feelings. Eventually, when I started having issues sleeping with it, I decided to move it to the living room. But at night, when the hallway lights were off and the house went quiet, I couldn't help but feel uneasy. I'd get hungry at night. Consider stealing a carton of milk or so. And then I'd feel eyes on me. I developed a healthy eating habit afterward. I stopped eating so late at night because I was scared of going to the sitting room at dark hours. One night she stayed over. It was raining so hard the gutters were overflowing. The sky kept flashing white with lightning. Thunder rattled the windows every few minutes. We turned off most of the lights in my room and started telling each other creepy stories. At some point I mentioned the teddy bear. I told her I just knew something was weird about it. That I always heard something scuffling around in the living room. That sometimes I didn't meet things in the same position where I'd left them. Instead of telling me I was crazy, she got excited. "Let's go check it out," she said. I looked at her like she'd suddenly grown 2 heads. Was she really asking us go walk toward the one room in the house I avoided? My bedroom door was already halfway open. The hallway was dim, only lit by occasional lightning flashing through the front windows. Every time the sky lit up, the walls would glow white for a split second, then everywhere would go dark again. I became hyper-aware of everything, from the hum of the refrigerator in the distance to the ticking of the wall clock and the faint rattle of rain against the glass. Between lightning strikes, the darkness felt thick and ominous, pressing in from both sides. I kept expecting to hear something shift ahead of us. Not loud, just enough to confirm that we weren't alone in our imagination. My friend squeezed my hand once, half laughing, half nervous, and I realized neither of us was breathing normally. We were holding the air in our lungs like any sudden sound might trigger something waiting at the end of the corridor. We found the teddy bear lying on its back. I flashed my torchlight at it, only to see that one of the buttons that stood in place of its eyes had been ripped out. My friend grabbed my arm. "Did you do that?" "No," I answered. The rain pounded harder against the windows. The tree outside scraped against the siding in the wind, making this weird sound. We left the playroom and continued our investigation of other places in the house. We giggled. We jumped at shadows. It started feeling like fun again. Until we felt somewhat ravenous. We would have to walk through the living room to get to the kitchen. I suggested that we wait till morning, but after a while, the hunger got too much to ignore. As we walked towards the living room, the first thing that caught my attention was the teddy bear. It was looking directly at us. I didn't scream. I didn't freeze. I ran. We both did. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. We stayed in my room the rest of the night with every light on. The next morning, I pleaded with my dad to help get rid of it. The pros that come with living with your parents. He finally agreed, and a few days later, it was gone. Just like that. I felt better for a while, but the sounds didn't stop. I still heard soft scratching and light running sounds. Over the next few weeks, my parents started noticing it too. My mom mentioned hearing noises in the attic. My dad said something had gotten into the garage trash. One night, during another heavy storm, the sound was louder than ever. My dad grabbed a flashlight and finally checked the attic. That's when we found them. Mice. A lot of them. They'd eaten some of the wires in the room and left little droppings everywhere. They'd been living up there for who knows how long, and during storms they got active. Every time lightning flashed and thunder cracked, they'd panic and run, knocking into things. The electrician came later to fix the faulty light. Turned out the storm had tripped a loose wire. As for the bear facing backward, my dad eventually admitted he'd turned it around while cleaning because he thought it looked creepy staring out like that. And when the mice started running around in the walls during the storm, the vibration likely shifted some of the lighter items on the shelf. The toy had not suddenly moved on its own. Knowing the explanation didn't fully erase the memory. Because here's the thing about fear, it doesn't listen to logic. It makes up its own logic. And when you already believe something is wrong, every coincidence feels like proof. Even now, years later, when I hear scratching in the walls during heavy rain, there's still a split second where I feel like I'm back in that hallway. If you enjoyed these rainy night horror stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next upload. And tell me in the comment section below, which one of these experiences sent chills down your spine?